I'll get a big one. No, I get a big one. No, I get a.
We'll see where I end up.
No, I get a big one. No, I get a big one. No, I get a big one.
See you.
Oh, yeah.
You're distracted.
I'm trying to get rid of this. No charge.
That was probably.
When you think it games when you're trying to be good at
We're not my horse.
A glow? Bro, no, it was the same thing again. No, it was the same one. That was the world of the other yesterday. That's why I'm pissed.
Was that the real world?
Yeah, that was the actual world. Insane. What a dumb.
Yeah, no, I heard him too, and I was like, I was like this, and I was like, oh, I didn't.
Slide. Jelly, that's it. Oh my gosh. What is it? Okay. Elite. Bro, you waited 6. No, I got it. Bro, I won. No, you waited to.
Oh, you put your.
Oh, it's just.
Alright, enjoy that.
Okay.
How did I go? How is he so bad? Bro, check. Wait.
That's crazy.
I have something to be in eggs. Bro, I found one. I didn't go to the bathroom.
I knew it.
I went to your
paper.
I went to the door. Bro, you have to find one that says like you get a party. I went to the dorms. I circled around the dorms, couldn't find any. And then I found one. There has to be one fucking garden back here. There's so many flowers. I looked. I think like.
So what's the plan? It's just that.
There's 200 eggs, and then there's 8 that say like use one, right? Or there's like a $5 gift card that I think there's using tricks. I do it for the fans. I would drink coffee.
That like limited words.
What do you drink? It's smart to drink water. That's what you have to drink it off the tap. I already know that. The water's kind of great.
What that word? Oh my gosh, bro.
You did what? That's just kind of. Stay away from that.
No. No way. It's Dobby.
Dobby?
Wait, who should I get? No, do not tell him. I know the word. There's no way it's a triple V.
Bobby.
Triple V is very.
You wanna try?
I was thinking that, but.
Hit it.
Bro, it's there.
Wait, we're not.
Yeah.
Dobbs. Bobby.
What's Bobby? I have
the same shirt.
Actually,
I have the same shirt. 218. The same shirt.
Well,
that's the same choice.
Hella twinning.
That's not funny.
Hey, Mil.
I try my best to look violent.
I wish I could do that right now. I'm like, bro, but if I don't know.
Let's go.
I just not open for now.
He said Matt. He said Matt.
He's going back to school.
He said Matt.
I'm not trying to get back.
Are you trying to hit your max? Or are you trying to go to max? But we gotta scour the room. Scour the room, scour the room.
But I did the same thing. The fact that we're running, the fact that we're running the defense today.
Yeah, I didn't do that today.
I would do it Thursday and then we get a rest. It's like, but some of us have to work on things. Do you work on Friday? I work on Saturday. I work in sessions with you. Oh. You were Saturday?
Yeah.
I work in the Friday. You were Saturday?
I work Friday and Saturday.
You know, I'm so proud of you.
Early around here. Sure. What are you saying? I didn't realize you got referred. I was on really works. Yeah. Do I sell? Do I?
Izzy, I'm not seeing your any sort of notes or slides. Do you have anything for me to pull up?
I shared it with you, but I don't know if printed it last night.
Okay, let me double check that. I'm seeing the attendance, but might be good just to try to submit it like as an attachment. Well, why don't we go ahead and get started while we're getting everything set up here. So welcome back. Hope your week is going well. I just want to give you all a couple reminders as we head into the week. So first of all, today is our last required class meeting before we get into the optional study day. So today we are discussing dramatism, and on Friday, you do not have to come into class. Attendance is not formally taken, but you're welcome to come in. I'll be here if you'd like a place to work, a place to discuss your application paper, or just the space to get that or anything else that you need to get done. As a reminder, application paper number 1 is due this Sunday unless you've requested an extension in advance. I'm happy to look over drafts, outlines, or answer any questions. Just make sure that you get that to me by the end of the day on Friday so that I can turn that back around to you on time. So I look forward to seeing your work. Again, I'm asking you to use one of these assigned theories and apply that theory to a piece of communication of your choosing. Again, the rubric and expectations for this assignment are there here for your review. Best of luck in working on that, and I look forward to seeing what you come up with. Doesn't need to be perfect because you'll have the chance to either revise this or your second application paper for your final assignment in course. So last class, we talked about rhetoric, the available means of persuasion, how persuasion is used to convey meaning. We had Britt share an applied example that looks at rhetoric in action. And we have blank, which involves the use of credibility to support an argument. Anyone want to take a stab at what this is? So what is the use of credibility according to rhetoric? Yes, so this is ethos, right? So ethos is drawing upon your own credibility, your background, your expertise. You might say, well, I've been a biologist for 20 years, so I know a thing or two about this animal species. Logos is the use of logic, and pathos is the use of emotion. So one way you can conduct a rhetorical analysis for your paper is to explore how ethos, pathos, and logos are being used. So for today, we're going to be talking about dramatism. So dramatism is in many ways concerned with how we utilize storytelling, presentation, and again, elements of rhetoric, but they're assembled in such a way that asks us to think about their presentation and depiction as it occurs in media and life. And so it's a very broad theory that covers a lot about how we're influenced and influence one another. And we'll have Izzy share a class presentation in just a bit. So dramatism, right, is essentially a very broad theory that's making an argument for how we present ourselves and engage with one another. So last class, today, and then our theory next week, narrative paradigm, are all very concerned with rhetoric. They're very broad theories that are trying to explain how we are persuaded, how we influence each other, how messages shape our shared sense of reality, and our ability to communicate effectively with one another. So this theory takes a lot of very broad assumptions and beliefs. You might be familiar with the classic Shakespeare line, all the world's a stage, we are merely players, right? In the same way, dramatism is suggesting that essentially our lives, our experiences as people can be understood as kind of like a drama, right? We are players, we're occupying a scene in our lives in terms of our human interactions and relationships to other people, right? And in this scene, we also have action, we have things that take place. So you and your roommate are coming in and, you know, your roommate discovers that there is a cockroach in your apartment or dorm and you're dealing with that conflict. What do? Right? There's some means for the action to take place. There's a purpose, right? To figure out how to get rid of the cockroach or figure out how you might deal with an infestation. So in this way, this is an example here of dramatism, of how we as people kind of think about and can understand our lives following the elements of something like a play or production or film. And the idea here that by purging audiences of guilt, that dramatism is effective. It's a way in which we become persuaded. If we feel sort of guilt, anxiety, fear related to an issue, it's persuasive for us to feel like that is being resolved in some way, shape, or form. So this is taking on a rhetorical, semiotic, and critical tradition, and in terms of its approach and analysis, right? It's public, rhetorical. It's also taking on interpretive and hermeneutic, as we've talked about, moving that direction from more positivistic empirical work. So the application for today is, you might be familiar with the Elvis film that came out last year. It was very popular, starring Austin Butler. In the past, I've used the example of Bohemian Rhapsody with Rami Malek as Freddie Mercury, but there's a lot of different examples here of kind of the popular biopic genre, right, which takes the experiences of a famous figure like an actor, a musician, etc., and dramatizes them. And a lot of the critique of these films is that the representation of these people as characters in a documentary or a biopic, right, is not necessarily entirely accurate. There's a lot of liberties taken in terms of the framing, choices, way that people are represented that might be skewed, inaccurate, and so on. So there's a lot of discussion here about how someone as a person existed as a person in history versus the way in which dramatism helps us to frame that person and that experience as it's depicted in a more fictionalized context. So what this theory comes from is Kenneth Burke. So Kenneth Burke was kind of an interesting figure who brought a lot to our understanding of communication, of rhetoric, of a variety of forms of human engagement. Famously, Burke wasn't really a professor anywhere. He just kind of hopped around and like published things and came up with books and ideas and you know, a lot of thoughts. It was a very kind of colorful character. But in addition to the idea of dramatism, he's very well known for a rhetoric of motives and of identification. So one of Burke's primary arguments is that we are persuaded through the process of identification, that is, by us finding similarities between ourselves and the person who is attempting to persuade us, we become more persuaded and compelled by their arguments, right? There's a good chance if you were recruited into EOU that you had the chance to talk to a current student in EOU who was telling you about their experience and encouraging you to come here. Similarly, if we think about the drama literary example last class, right? Mark Antony is addressing, you know, I'm a Roman too. I feel the sadness of Caesar Rising too, and using that as a means of connecting. So Burke brings in a lot of insights into how we become persuaded through our process of connecting, relating, and presenting ourselves to other people. So he brings a lot to the table in terms of understanding dramatism. So dramatism brings in a few key ideas here. One of them is that humans are animals who use symbols. This goes all the way back to symbolic interaction theory, right? But a very kind of core assumption, we use symbols to communicate and convey meaning with one another. Okay, with you so far. Secondarily, Burke is arguing that the usage of language, of symbols to convey meaning is crucially important. Okay, great, right? We use these symbols in a very meaningful way. To understand, relate to each other, communication, our words, our choices, things that are written, use of emojis, all make sense. And then the tricky part here is understanding what a terministic screen is and how terministic screen is used to highlight the moment of rhetoric or of persuasion that's at play. So let's break down some of these ideas in a little bit more detail so we can understand some of the assumptions and attitudes that Burke is bringing into the picture. So one of the key ideas here is the idea of a terministic screen, right? If communication is the use of language to convey social reality and meaning, well, how do we understand and know something? Again, throughout the class, we've used the idea of metaphor of like putting on a pair of glasses, right? And using those glasses means of highlighting, distorting, viewing, changing how we understand events, right? If you wear sunglasses in a classroom, it's going to be very distorted. It's going to be hard to hear. People might think you're hungover. How you're portraying and understanding events is a deterministic screen. So if I were to say the word dog, right, what do you think of? The kind of dog that comes to your mind when you hear that word is probably driven by your own experience, whether or not you've had dogs growing up, kind of dogs you've had growing up, so on. Secondarily, there's this idea of identification, right? Identification deals with the idea that, as mentioned, our ability to be persuaded is the relationship, the commonality, and the similarities that we experience between ourselves and other people. So in other words, I am similar to you. I make an appeal and say, I was just like you. I grew up in the same place as you, and therefore, my points and my persuasion is more compelling, right? Oftentimes, we're more persuaded by somebody that we know and we feel like we share things in common. Additionally, we have the idea of consubstantiation. That is, we use the process of identifying and finding similarities with people as a way to build a relationship, finding things in common, sharing those things in common, sharing kind of a shared passion or interest as part of the process. There's also what's known as sort of this challenge of guilt. So guilt is a key element here of dramatism. And what Burke suggests is that there is some type of issue or problem that is to some degree causing guilt, discomfort, cognitive dissonance with us, right? So I identify with you. I say, we have a lot in common. I really believe we both really like pets. And I think it's awful that, so many pets are in shelters and don't have homes. Developing guilt through this process of identifying our shared interest in pets and motivating you to adopt a pet. So order and hierarchy, the idea that we're oftentimes motivated to organize our thoughts in a clear way versus rejection or the fear of not identifying with another person is another key element of this process. And as part of the kind of overall dramatic picture and stage that Burke lays out for us, he suggests that over the process of change or of development, a character or person is said to improve. They're said to make a change. So this way we absolve or resolve the guilt through change, through you adopting a pet because of our shared identification that we like pets. So in this way, we see this at play in a lot of examples of, film, television, storytelling. You might be familiar with Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey, the idea that a main character or hero is going through a prolonged process where they develop. They're called to act and behave in a certain way. They go through trials and tribulations, and they experience some type of personal growth through sacrifice. Again, a lot of films follow this. We watch Star Wars. Even the co-creator of Rick and Morty, Dan Harmon, right? He's a fan of using the story circle and hero's journey style in writing an episode. So there's a lot of different examples here in media of how various stories are presented and portrayed in the kind of dramatistic frame. So Burke is very well known, and the easiest way to use and apply Burke in an application paper is through the use of the pen pad, right? So the pen pad, think about it like a star, and when you're conducting some type of analysis or criticism using the pen pad, you're looking at essentially 5 different parts. One is the agent. In other words, the agent is the person who is performing or doing something. So, in a film like Star Wars, right, you've got Luke Skywalker, you've got the protagonist. He is the person who is, trying to save the galaxy, stop Vader, all that, right? In addition to that, you have not only the agent, but also their attitude. So, for instance, how are they approaching or dealing with this particular issue? They might be reluctant, they might be very passionate, they might be interested, they might be thrust upon to address an issue. Secondarily, we have what's known as agency. That is, means that are available for the act, including the speech or issue that the person is trying to deal with. In this case, right, The agency, well, Luke gets a lightsaber, he trains with Yoda, he starts to develop an understanding of the Force, how to use it, right? So he develops a sense of agency that's guiding his actions and behavior. The scene, right, is the location, the space in which the particular speech, presentation, or rhetorical element is at play. So scene can literally be, be the Death Star, Tatooine. We can think about a variety of locations in which things happen, but location matters. That's going to impact how we're understanding the message. The purpose is the goals, right? What are the goals of the individual or actor? Maybe the goal is to restore peace to the galaxy, and the act is what that person says or does, right? So the process of, traveling, with lightsaber battles, all of those things. So if we're breaking this down together, yes, we can look at this and its application to film, media, and so on. But Burke is making a broader argument here about how we can incorporate the pentad in understanding daily life and our own experiences, right? We were looking at a famous example. We're thinking about, for example, Dr. Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. We think about his experience, his agency, and his credibility and background. We think about the location, right? We think about the context of civil rights, the support and localized grassroots movements that are happening. The purpose and act, right? The rhetorical style, the elements, the claims that he is making and the support for those claims. All of those things come together to shape our understanding of that speech. Right? So dramatism is really good to use if you have something like a formal speech, a public address, or something similar, where you can identify some of those key elements, right? And it's not just looking at this is the pentad, this is the agent, this is the agency. It's not just like listing out what those things are. It's using those as a starting point to explain what overall is occurring and happening. So dramatism, right? It's used a lot. It's understood in a lot of kind of classical rhetorical and communication contexts, but it does have some critiques. One of those critiques being that this is seen as very wide in scope, right? It's covering a lot of human experience. It can be hard to use given just how general it is by saying, all the world's a stage. We're all kind of engaged in this dramatic performance, and we can analyze communication on that basis. That's covering a lot of ground. It also has a lot of different terms, right? Things like deterministic screen, all the different parts of the pentad, and so on. There's a lot of concepts that Burke is trying to lay out here in describing dramatism. And another critique here is that it's leaving out some elements that we might consider in rhetoric. So some of the things like form, genre, epididactic, deliberative, ethos, pathos, they're not thought about in the same degree or in the same way as we discussed last time. So sometimes Burke's theory is being critiqued, because while pentad might be useful, it's a little bit of an incomplete look at the totality of rhetoric and the ways in which rhetoric is used that can shape and impact our lives. So there's some useful elements here. And why don't we shift gears, and looks like I got a forwarded presentation. Okay, great. So it looks like we've got that working for you, Izzy. Thank you. You're welcome to click or use the arrow keys if you're working through.
All right. I did the article, The Dramatic Presentation of News and Its Effects on Cognitive Complexity. Some key ideas. The news highly dramatizes the news that it is presenting. The news follows the format of beginning, middle, and end for their stories, which is a major part of drama for starters. They tell stories this way because they only have a short air time, so they feel that they must maintain attention while managing time well and telling a story. There is a line in the article that essentially says that there is a line between evoking an emotional response as well as trying to make sure that we are still rationally thinking about the news that we are seeing. When planning to present a story, they would choose the most exciting video shots of a scene instead of something perhaps more important to the story. They may choose a plane crash scene versus perhaps the people on the ground waiting for help to arrive. Another key point is that taking away and adding in drama in the news might affect how our cognitive ability to recall what we witnessed. There was a study done that was mentioned in the article that attested how the level of dramatics in a news story would affect political priorities. In the end, the more dramatic the news story, the less it would affect the political priority because they were more focused on the emotion of the story versus what the actual facts of the story were. In the article, it mentions that flashing images in the news may actually activate various parts of the schemata. These may not be related to what the reporter is saying, which leads us to not cognitively process what the news story is really about. The third key point is the function of news has shifted from informing to keep their audience entertained, which has caused myth to be integrated. The news tends to alter pictures, and some even talk about rumors that are in no way confirmed. We see this a lot more in celebrity news, but nonetheless, it is still the case of Photoshop and changing the story to make it more intriguing so that they keep an audience because that has become a very big part of the news. The aim to keep the audience entertained over telling the story as it is has become a big part of the news today. While sometimes it may not be the most negative thing because it does keep people entertained and it does tell the story in some way still, but we're focusing less on the facts and more on the interest of the audience. Connection to the series. The news follows the 6 elements of dramatism. These relate to how the news stories have become told. We have the act, which is what happened in the news, such as would be like a storm, a crime, a political party topic. There would be then the scene, when and where it happens, location of what happened, what time it happened, what day it happened. We have the agent who has done the act or who is talked at a political campaign or things such as that, or crimes, of course. How it was done, the agency, it talks more about how the crime was done, how the political party may have spoken at a convention, things such as that. Then they have the purpose, why they believe whatever has happened ended up happening. So why they think this crime has occurred, why do they think this weather is occurring, why do they think this political campaign occurred here specifically instead of there. And then the attitude is the bias that they hold prior to telling the news story. A lot of the times there are different news sources such as CNN and Fox, which are two very, very biased news sources. And a lot of the time they hold the bias before telling whatever story it may be. Then another aspect of dramatism that you see in this article is deterministic screens. Deterministic screens essentially illuminate certain aspects while suppressing other aspects of it. This specific term is a big aspect of what we see in the news. There is a lot of suppression of maybe information that might have been important being overpowered by things that are a big deal and going on really big right now. Knowledge about the theory. This article helps us better understand the 6 elements of dramatism and how they play a role in the news that we consume. We have all these different types of elements that really play into the news and how it is structured, and we see that in almost every single news source that we find, that we watch or read. It shows how this theory is not only related to the fictional world in movies, films, etc., but we also see how we can see it seeping into our own world. So when it comes to the news, we see this coming into play. It also helps us better understand what dramatism can look like in our world. So again, we can see that playing into the role in news. And that is it.
Izzy, thank you so much for sharing and bringing in this kind of outside example and application. I think this is really useful for a discussion about how dramatism is used, it's applied, and is relevant to our lives, right? As Izzy did a great job of explaining, bringing up here, dramatism is not just about fictional stories or films, although we can certainly put the dramatistic frame into understanding them. Instead, right, this is a much larger framework to understand a variety of forms of media and public communication. So I thought Izzy did a great job here, in particular, breaking down the different parts of the pentad and showing how news media coverage is aligned with that kind of thematic frame. So we watch or read a news headline, we see that way that headline is discussed in terms of its bias, in terms of its role, it's focused on entertainment, right? It's giving us a story, it's giving us characters, it's giving us stakes or significance. And in many ways, that information is not necessarily presented in a factual, like bullet pointed way. It's being presented like a story that we know is going to get attention, get traffic, and so on. Again, this, if we think back to post 9/11, right, the 24/7 news cycle, where there's been a shift in how news is presented that really highlights the constant depiction and sharing of that material. Well, that's something that we see very much at play in how news is depicted now, where it's very much trying to gain support, right? There might be journalistic integrity and a support for getting information out there, but it's a question of how that information is presented. I thought this presentation did a great job of getting into some of the ways that we can apply and use this theory. I wanted to show a trailer from the recent Elvis film that came out last year that I think does a good job of highlighting some of these elements of dramatism. In particular, right, a lot of these biopics, as mentioned, there's a discrepancy in some of the factual information as it's presented in the film versus how it's presented through history and our understanding of what actually occurred. Oftentimes things are embellished, left out, and changed. But what this shows us is the usage of identification, of dramatism, of relatability in the process of trying to tell a story and to create a sort of character that we can follow and to sympathize with. For example, right, the actual real life character or real life person, Elvis, of which this, film is depicting, there is a lot of critique and discussion among Black and African-American musicians and artists about the sort of appreciation versus appropriation, and concerns that, a lot of his popularity came from genre, style, and covering music and efforts that came from historically Black artists. And while to some degree they were seen as support, there's also criticism that the level of support and solidarity he's shown to have in the film did not fully represent the level of support he provided in real life. So there's, some ways in which there's concerns about inaccuracies, representation that can shape and distort, and again, dramatize our understanding of this historical event.
We didn't say it was going to Tennessee. Come on, you Mr. President. You ready for that? But it has nothing to do with us. Oh,
So, kind of some interesting things here. Again, for the life of me, do not know what the heck kind of voice Tom Hanks was trying to do in that movie, but there's been critique, right? Like his character, who's this the producer who brings him in, it's kind of depicted as this villainous character who, from what accounts in real life suggest, is actually a lot more sympathetic than the film might have depicted. But as we're watching the film, right, or seeing the trailer, there's very much a depiction of this kind of classical dramatism, hero's journey type structure. You have, he's not known well, he's not popular, but he starts to sing, he starts to gain popularity and traction. He's faced with various crises and issues, including the political and social landscape, how he's responding to those changes, gaining popularity and attention, right? So as we're following the elements of the pentat, dramatism, we're seeing that very much at play. We're also seeing that at play in the dramatization of real life events in history. Again, there's, I'm sure, a lot of other examples you can think about in popular media and film that get into some of these issues as well. So it raises a lot of questions. How do we represent history versus how is history remembered? How do we remember people, and how are those people represented through film? What I want us to do for today's attendance activity is to give you a chance to do some additional work in preparation for your first application paper due on Sunday. So I want you to think about the artifact that you're planning to use for this paper, or an artifact that you feel pretty sure that you're interested in using. And using the pentat, take some time to identify these different elements. What do you see as agent, agency, scene, purpose, and act? And then after that, I'll be having us kind of go around the room, and I'll be asking people to share some of the things that they've thought about here in terms of applying and utilizing the pentat. Have 4 more minutes to map out the parts of your artifact as you see it connecting to the pentad. What's up?
I don't have an artifact right now. So.
Yeah, think about one that you're interested in or a possible option. If you're not 100% sure about your artifact, you can pick one that you're interested in or thinking about or have brainstormed as a possibility. Take about 2 more minutes. And then finish up your work here. So what I'm going to ask that we do is I'm going to have us go around the room and pick to you, share what your artifact is or what you're thinking about as a possible artifact, and then share one of these parts of the pentad that you feel like is especially relevant or can be applied or used to that artifact. And we'll be able to hear each other, understand some of the artifacts that we're looking at and some of the ways that we're analyzing them. So we'll start over here on the side.
So with the pendant, I did my artifact on the film Christine,
Okay.
and in it, the act was suicide. The scene was live on a news broadcast. The agent was Christine Chella. And the agency was. Oh, how was it done? She used a pistol and shot it straight through her head. The external purposes were to bring ratings up and to let the world know the problems with commercial industries at the time. And they only cared about ratings and viewership. And the personal purpose is her mental issues and her unhappiness with her work situation.
Okay, so it sounds like you've got a very heavy, kind of challenging artifact there, right? I'm kind of exploring the way that this is being portrayed in the context of mental health, well-being, consumerism, of those problems. So I appreciate you sharing, kind of bringing that perspective in. Again, just share your artifact and one part of the pentat, one of those 5 pieces that find to be relevant here.
For my artifact, I was gonna do an episode from Solved Murder True Crimes.
Okay.
The scene, I haven't really narrowed it down to what episode I'm gonna use, but it was all over the world. Most of them are in the United States.
Great, yeah, so like a lot of these, they're between episodes, they're gonna be between locations, so if you're doing kind of the pentad, you'd be looking at how that particular scene is shaping the interactions, things for sure.
I was thinking about doing 86, a light novel.
Okay.
And the main character in one of the scenes is they do the act of just sobbing over the intercom as they're begging their comrades not to abandon them.
Wow, okay. Yeah, so, depiction of human emotion, challenges that we're expressing there, works really well, for analyzing this in the pentat.
I'm doing an episode from the television show The Rookie. And the purpose of the episode is to show, not to cross someone's given boundaries.
Okay. Yeah, so like a lot of times, right, in shows like that, there's a particular theme or through line, a lot of procedural type of television. So kind of understanding and parsing out that main purpose will work really well.
I chose the movie Call Me by Your Name. And the scene is Italy.
Okay. All right, so location, scenery, depiction of that scenery is going to play a big role in the action of the this.
So I'll be using the campaign, it's called the Beautiful Campaign, which is a work campaign, how every culture studies the American song that we have in one of the American Dream. Which it plays mostly the agencies and purpose and act, which is there's no main character telling his business, everyone is the main character telling his business in America. And the person telling us in the global diverse company.
Great. So kind of using an array of human experiences and storytelling to make the overall argument, which is something we can see a lot and again kind of complicates parts of this model.
Looking to use Breaking Bad and the agency is the criminal underworld about prison myself.
Yeah, I'm on season 6 of Better Call Saul now that it's on Netflix. I'm having fun with that. But yeah, a good example here of how location and like the very long shots that they do, parts of locations in Albuquerque are playing out as well. Back here.
I'm doing Orange is the New Black and you'll see things like prison.
Yeah. So a good example here of how like scene can drastically shape and impact it, right? The entire show is built off of the prison setting and using that setting as a means of telling its story and situating its characters. Right up here.
This also actually kind of difficult because the artifact that I'm going with is a video game that doesn't
Okay.
have speech.
Sure.
So I just pulled one out of nowhere. The artifact I chose was Friday the 13th, specifically the scene where spoiler alert, it's like a really good movie. Where Camilla Voorhees is revealed to be the killer. So I kind of decided that her agency was like how she cornered the final girl and like she killed all those kids and then like also violence and stuff like that.
What's the game you're looking at? What's the game you're looking at?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like, but that, you know, there's like the side scrolling going down into the underworld, like the different regions and biomes. I feel like, you know, there's ways that you maybe apply it there too. Good example.
I did in the movie The Dove and
Uh-huh.
the agent is the cheesy teen girl who like goes through her like self-realization around like the whole film and has a little speech at the end of
Yeah.
she is okay.
Yeah, so like, you know, we see that structure play out in a lot of examples in film, especially when it's very by the book in a lot of older films, and we kind of acknowledge that, and it's part of its aging for sure. Yeah.
I chose The Office and doing the episode Dinner Party.
Mhm.
And the scene is Michael and Jan's house and Jim and Pam were trying to give every excuse in the book to get out of there, but end up doing stuff.
Again, the way that the location and scene shapes the conflict is good for understanding. Accurate, Lindsay?
I did the movie She's the Man, her speech at the end about the purpose was to really show that girls can do socks as well as men at high school.
Yeah, good example here about using this kind of inspirational, motivational speech. Okay.
I was doing the Breakfast Club
Mhm.
and it shows like how the students' relationships become more intimate over time. And for scene, I feel like it's school.
Yeah, sounds like you're probably using like social penetration theory. Yeah, that's what you're doing.
I'm thinking about doing Spider-Man Far From Home. When Mysterio posts a video, like saying who Spider-Man is, and we're trying to against the villain on the billboard in the city.
Yeah, so kind of breaking away trust, forcing a disclosure in a way. It's good stuff to have.
So I'm using the song This Is America, and the purpose is to raise awareness about police brutality, racism, and gun violence in the US.
Right, so the depiction of both the video, musical, visual elements, there's been a lot of good analysis of that. I think there's a lot struck on this. Right?
I'm doing the movie Step Brothers, and the purpose is just kind of to show their timeline from like when their parents start dating and forcing them to live together and how they start like
Mhm.
as like rivals, and then how their like relationship kind of develops and then they end they become best friends.
Great. Yeah, so usage of developing relationships and then showing that depiction over time on the screen. Indeed.
I'm doing the Netflix show Veep, and the agency is mostly like deception, television.
As like used as a major source of conflict that's driving the show and understanding and picking apart those different parts. And back to it, Tyler.
I turned this one next thing by Jordan Davis, and it's like they just say about how like this relationship is more than
Thank you. So, you know, even if you're not using dramatism for your artifact, you're probably not. It's good to have us like not only understand and hear your artifacts as you're sharing them or your possible options, but also to hear how the PenPad enhances our understanding of these different things, right? You're breaking out, looking at the different parts and how these different parts shape the artifact and the key ideas that artifact is sharing. Again, gets at how the PenPad can be used and how dramatism can be used more generally to explain our everyday communication, performance, engagement, and so on. So that's dramatism. Again, another theory very much concerned with rhetoric. Next, on Friday, we have an attendance officer workshop day. You're welcome to come in if you'd like. And then next Monday, we will return for a discussion about the narrative paradigm. So please email or passport your attendance if you haven't already done so. Enjoy the rest of your sunny day. Maybe find some hidden eggs on campus. And I'll see you again either Friday or next week.
For interview.